Good evening. This is Maestro Patello with a Dawn of War 2 Retribution Elite modcast. Today we have a 1v1 on Outer Reaches. Our first player today is PhatE, playing as the Orc Warboss, big, tanky, melee hero orc. Starts out with a Twin Link Shooter and a Chain Axe. He can disrupt with using his Stomp ability, and he also is very, very powerful with his Warboss buffs. His opponent is Fear, playing as the teleporting Warp Spider Exarch, using his mobility to be very, very aggressive and already start harassing PhatE very, very early on. The Warp Spider Exarch is a teleporting ranged hero, but he's also often used with his blades to actually tie things up into melee, which is generally an advantage of any teleporting unit. And we already see how he's been very, very annoying with his ability to teleport, and that's one of his big things. He also has some very interesting late-game war gears. Before I start talking more about this game, I wanted to kind of go a little off topic and just say that I recently checked out the website for companyofheroes2.org, or just coh2.org, and I noticed they had something that said Elite Mod. And apparently some individuals have started an Elite Mod for the original Company of Heroes to kind of continue making a balanced patch for that game. Basically, they have the original Company of Heroes has its own Elite Mod. And coincidentally, the modder for that was actually Calaris, who was, I believe, the original modder for Elite Mod. But anyway, that was just a short little tangent. Back to this game, we see that I think Fear used the mobility he had from that the Warp Spider Exarch to distract a lot of PhatE's units early. And although I didn't say it as it was happening, I believe PhatE actually was distracted by all of that, and he didn't get his opening caps up as quickly as Fear did. The Warp Spider Exarch can be a very, very annoying hero in that sense. There are really some very, very powerful things he can do that virtually no other hero can, aside from maybe the Mech Boy. That being said, regardless of whatever early advantage Fear had, PhatE definitely taking a little bit of control now. Just won that engagement, wiping out a dire Avenger squad. This build that Fear has right now, he had triple dire Avengers, now he only has double dire Avengers. He definitely went for a heavy range DPS build, especially since dire Avengers, although they're squishy right out of the gate, they also start out with very good range DPS for a tier 1 unit. It's roughly on par with Tactical Marines. That is for a much cheaper cost, but part of the reason it's cheaper is that you're getting a much squishier squad. But still, just the DPS you get for dire Avengers is very good at a tier 1 level. And especially when combined with the Warp Spider Exarch, that means Fear is going to have a pretty high range DPS build overall. He also chose not yet to get his Dire Avenger aspects, and that means he was able to get this Guardian weapon team out very, very early. We also had very early power farms from all of these players. I feel like if this were a Space Marine or a Chaos Space Marine match, you would not see these power farms down as early as they have been put. PhatE is forced off the field right now, so Fear is setting himself up in a way that's allowing him to bash the generators. Of course, right now he's completely unopposed, but he has his Guardian weapon team set up behind his Dire Avengers, which is kind of to help him once PhatE actually gets here. Basically, if the Dire Avengers actually start getting attacked, they can move back, and then they'll be drawing any of PhatE's units into the arc of this Guardian weapon team. I mean, right now the Guardian weapon team is doing nothing, so Fear is actually choosing to move it around, in part because he probably just feels like he's doing nothing and he wants to do a little bit more with it. He didn't have to worry too much, although now it would have helped if he had his Guardian weapon team there. We actually have an early Ardboys on these Sluggas, I think, just because they took so much damage on approach to double Dire Avengers, because again, Dire Avengers are going to be doing pretty good range DPS to start out, that two of them are going to do a lot of damage to a squishy Slugger Squad on approach. Now, one of the things that I think PhatE did very smartly is that he approached from different directions with both his Slugger Boys and his Warboss. The Slugger Boys came up around here, while the Warboss came in through the middle. And he probably knew, I believe he saw that Fear had a Guardian weapon team, and he didn't just want to run all his melee units right into the Guardian weapon team. So that's, and we also see right here the way that PhatE is multitasking right now. He had his Sluggers over here, he had his Warboss going through the middle, and he had his Shooter Boys going around all the way to the left or the west to go for a Generator Bash to try to return or basically counter bash, since Fear had gotten a Generator Bash on PhatE's generators. So PhatE was doing like 3 different things right there, and that's an example of him playing this game, basically playing 1v1 as opposed to teams, where people are usually just running around all of their forces, just all around together as a blob. We see PhatE had his mind and his hands in 3 different places, doing many different things, and it requires more micro, but it's also just in some ways getting more things done. And there are times in 1v1 when you will want most of your units together. But I think that was just what we saw from PhatE, was an example of him spreading his units out and that actually being the right thing. He's able to force off the Guardian weapon team up north. Alright, we got some Dire Avengers going around back. Now, wow. So Fear he still hasn't gotten his Dire Avenger aspects. Now, there's definitely some sacrifices in terms of not getting the Dire Avenger aspects. He's potentially going to bleed more from his Dire Avengers because they only have 100 health per model. They're as squishy as Guardsmen right now. And he doesn't have those retreat grenade, that retreat grenade potential. And that's pretty big, considering the potential that has to wipe things on retreat. Wow, but I mean, look at the damage right now that PhatE is taking. So he's not having that potential of retreat grenades, but he got to... The advantage of that is that he got to tier 2 early, and he's got Warp Spiders out, and PhatE is really, really going to be at the mercy of these Warp Spiders. One of the advantages of Orcs in general is that they usually have range DPS superiority courtesy of Shooter Boys. Now, that's definitely a little more contested in this matchup with a Warp Spider Exarch with Dire Avengers, and PhatE actually only getting one big shooter upgrade. But definitely with the Warp Spiders, that definitely puts the range superiority in Fear's favor, with these Warp Spiders doing, I believe, roughly, I believe it's 72, or I believe DPS in the 70s or around 80 right out of the gate. And then you get the Warp Spider Exarch, who he actually does less damage without the aspect. And then once you have the aspect, we see that right now he does 21.3 DPS. So we're fighting a lot of ranged on range, and the Warboss is going to have a lot more trouble with that, and that might be part of why he got the Angry Bits. The Angry Bits is going to allow the Warboss to get into melee a lot more easily. Look at this Pain Boy getting focused so heavily on approach. The Pain Boy is going to go down. That was a very, very close call. And we see that PhatE is actually really having a lot of trouble right now. He has the map control, but he is losing very, very badly in terms of engagements. Warboss in kind of a bad position, but actually does manage to get into the Guardian weapon team. PhatE getting bled horribly, while at the same time, yeah, mostly just getting bled horribly because he's just taking too much damage on approach. I mean, even this Warboss right now having a lot of trouble making himself relevant. Now, the Death Dread is something that is going to temporarily turn the tide in PhatE's favor, because now he has something that none of Fear's units can do damage to. And part of the problem that PhatE's been having is that he's been just taking way too much damage basically from all of the ranged units that Fear has. Now, one of the ways Fear is going to deal with that is he's going to get a second Warp Spider squad, first of all. But in general, he can use the mobility of Warp Spiders and the Warp Spider Exarch, of course, to basically have these ranged units avoid the Death Dread. I would think. That's certainly one thing he can do. The Warp Spider Exarch, yeah, and in fact, now he's doing that. He's just getting all of his units out of there. Are we going to have these Ludas open fire? Yes, we are. So, very, very nice positioning of these Ludas. I mean, you would never think. Like, it seems like they're not facing in a good position. But, I mean, Fear just happened to teleport right into there, and that Luda positioning ended up being perfect. I mean, this is something that on paper, just looking at this, for the most part, it doesn't look that good. The main thing that, I guess, works about it is that it's supposed to defend against a back cap. And in that sense, it works very, very well. Although that's also a Luda squad just sitting here doing nothing. Although Ludas are not that expensive. Mostly doing nothing, not really contributing to most engagements. But, nevertheless, still worked out quite well there. Probably unintentionally, but just happened to work out quite well there. Now, the Warboss, I feel like as strong of a hero as he can be, right now he is very, very well countered. And this is a situation, given the build that Fear has, where he really is going to struggle to find a way to make himself relevant. Sometimes one of the things that people do with that, as far as the Warboss, one of the way Warboss players actually, basically just what they do with him, is that they actually kind of relegate him to a capping unit. Which sounds kind of sad for just what the Warboss, considering what the Warboss is, but it sometimes just is the best use of his time. And I've seen high-level Warboss players like Steve and Holy Hammer do that with the Warboss. My God, look at the range damage that this Pain Boy is taking. Double Dire Avengers, double Warp Spiders. We do now have a Bright Lance from Fear, as well as a Wraith Lord from Fear as well. So that period, wow, though I didn't even see it, but the Pain Boy went down. I didn't even see it. I didn't even catch it. But that temporary advantage of the Death Dread is now absolutely fully gone. With the Wraith Lord now on the field being a superior walker, I believe the Wraith Lord and the Death Dread have the same DPS, but as we can see, the Death Dread has less health at 1050, whereas the Wraith Lord has 1200. And as of right now, the Wraith Lord also has better support, because we have just better ranged units doing more damage to the infantry support, as well as we have better anti-vehicle support in the form of double Haywires. I don't know why the Wraith Lord isn't doing it. Yeah, just go for the Death Dread. PhatE was able to force off the Bright Lance, but not even kill it, and now he's just going to lose his Wraith Lord. I mean, it loses Death Dread, but actually he's not going to lose his Death Dread. I'm totally wrong. I mean, it's actually quite amazing that he managed to get his Death Dread out of there, and if you think about it, the moment of hesitation that Fear had right there, we saw a moment where he was not attacking the Death Dread with the Wraith Lord, and as a result, this Death Dread actually got away with 40 hits, with 40 hit points. And that's really big, because just one more hit from the Wraith Lord would have taken out that Death Dread, and he definitely gave up at least one hit with the Wraith Lord, if not two. Now, PhatE, and again, I'm unfortunately missing things. PhatE actually managed to take out a Warp Spider squad, and that is huge, considering that's one fewer Haywire grenades. I'm using fewer because that's actually grammatically correct as opposed to less. One fewer Haywire grenades, and or what would really be grammatically correct is one fewer Haywire grenade. And now I just lost track, being pedantic. But anyway, PhatE also managed to get out some tank busters, so now he's got some slightly better anti-vehicle support, and he's choosing to keep his Ludas infiltrated, covering this point, and not getting a beamy Luda. But wow, those tank busters did appear to do nothing against the Wraith Lord. Actually, they did about 50 damage. It didn't seem like much. And we're still not seeing... I feel like we're still not seeing a whole lot out of this Warboss, at least not in terms of upgrades. I think he was partly responsible for taking out that Warp Spider squad. To be honest, I wouldn't be entirely surprised to see Fear get a new Warp Spider squad. And did he just do that? Yes, he's doing that right now. I said I wouldn't be surprised if he did it, and that's exactly what he did. And the reason I wasn't going to be surprised for that is, aside from how powerful it was, is the fact that Fear is playing as the Warp Spider Exarch, so he has the Warp Spider call-in global, which is very, very powerful. Because he can call in those Warp Spiders very cheaply. Here, I think the Death Dread might even... No! I think one more hit would have taken out the Guardian Weapon team. Ah, I see. He's prioritizing taking out the Wraith Lord, which might actually be the smart play. And you know what? I think he is going to take out the Wraith Lord. Oh my god, we have a Death Dread on Wraith Lord sync kill. Nice. Especially considering I would think of the Wraith Lord as the superior walker. A Death Dread on Wraith Lord sync kill is pretty nice. So, I take that back. PhatE gave up wiping the Guardian Weapon team because he wanted to make sure that he took out the Wraith Lord. And he would have wiped out that Guardian Weapon team, but wiping out the Wraith Lord is definitely the bigger win. Now, the Warboss did go down in that engagement. Part of the reason that he went down, I believe, has to do with the war gear that the Warp Spider Exarch got. Now, if we can, unfortunately, I can't target the Warp Spider Exarch, but yes, I knew it. He does have the heavy gauge Death Spinner. That allows him to do knockback with his ranged attack, which is an extremely powerful ability. In fact, I would say compared to other similar war gears, like the Mastercrafted Bolter for the Apothecary, or now it's actually a Storm Bolter for the Apothecary, and the enhanced custom shooter for the Warboss himself, I would say the heavy gauge Death Spinner is actually the best of those war gears, because you channel energy to the heavy gauge Death Spinner, and so that means it just knocks back continuously. Now, that does mean that he's using up a lot of energy, and that can take away energy that you would use to teleport, but just the effect that that can have, especially in terms of taking out heroes, can be really... It's an extremely powerful ability, and when it's used against heroes, your hero can really be screwed unless you can basically just stop the Warp Spider from doing it. Either get him to retreat. My god, the damage those tank busters are taking. Or if you can just, like, force... Oh my... That's going to be it for the tank busters. That's it. They're done. Jeez. So, PhatE... My god. If and when he can get into tier... He got some... Oh, he had to buy his Warboss back, so that's what cost him. And now he's actually getting the spiky armor, and the reason he's getting... Like, I feel... Part of me feels like he should be investing in something else other than Warboss war gears, but I know why he's doing that. He's doing it because the increased health regeneration from spiky armor, as well as the increased health regeneration from angry bits, is extremely powerful in terms of making the Warboss very tanky. So he's going to be using that basically as a way of allowing his Warboss to do things. And my god, now it's actually the Warp Spiders taking out a huge amount of damage, coming very close. They might take out the Slugger Boys, though. Oh my god. Look at that damage, and they do take out the Slugger Boys. This double Warp Spider build hurts so much, and now they're leveling, going to make them even more powerful. And I was going to say, like, what I wanted to say is I feel like he might need to invest, PhatE might need to, might need or want to invest in something like, if he can get to it, Flash gets in tier 3. But that's going to be just so hard to make it happen. With just right now with the way the economy's looking. And he's getting another Death Dread? That's interesting. Stompy Tin Can. Love that. Kill a can. But it is interesting to see him go for another Death Dread. I don't know if he's doing that intentionally or if it's on Overwatch. He still has his old Death Dread. But Fear still has his Guardian weapon team, so he's got two potential Haywires, as well as a Bright Lance. So especially this one can definitely potentially actually die, and right now it's not in a very good position, mostly being covered by this Luda, which this Luda has been very, very interesting. But it's actually very nice that he's getting that Guardian weapon team off early. And we see that PhatE is trying to fight these Warp Spiders with the Shooter Boys. Unfortunately, I believe the Shooter Boys do just straight up lose that. I mean, he's fighting it out. Yeah, he bled models on one of the Shooter Boy squads without taking out any models on either of the Warp Spiders. Just because the Shooter Boys do less damage. They do less damage. They are at least with the levels that PhatE has. As well as, whoa! My God. I don't even know. Oh, I think that was a special attack that hit the Warp Spiders even after they teleported. And then they were just right in front of the Luda firing arc. And this Luda nearly died. He's going to go for the cap, even though he's got, like, no health left. This has been a bizarre game. But both players are also bleeding and losing things a lot, so neither one is actually that close to tier 3. Especially, neither one of them has power, and part of that is just because they've both been doing so much to destroy each other's power, especially Fear with the massive amount of range damage that he's putting out right now, and especially he's got level 3 Dire Avengers, level 2 Warp Spiders, which is absolutely ridiculous in terms of the kind of damage he's putting out. Level 4 Warp Spider Exarch, which is, I mean, by himself, the Warp Spider Exarch, his damage isn't that great. But I mean, just on top of everything that's already here. And then we even have the Guardian weapon team, which can use the Scorch ability, which is new to the Elite mod. I mean, it's been around for a while, but it's in Elite mod and not in retail. It's basically like Guide, the Farseer's Guide, except it's on the Guardian weapon team. And it keeps the Bright Lance a lot more relevant, even after vehicles have been destroyed, than say a Devastator Las Cannon or a Beamy Luda. And that Luda Boy squad finally went down. It was kind of sad about that, actually. So at this point, this is actually very, very tough. Both these players don't really have that much in terms of resources. What I'm actually afraid is that Fear might get a 3rd Warp Spider squad. I'm afraid he might actually do that. He's getting very close to the red for it, or he already has the red for it. I don't remember the exact cost. I think it's actually like, I don't know actually. He's at the very least he's close to it. So he might do that, but I don't know if we'll see either of these players get to tier 3. And I mean, if we notice, for the most part, PhatE is not winning these range fights. The only way he's really winning the engagements right now is actually basically the Death Dreads. And those are actually in dire need of repair. And PhatE, I was going to say, he has nothing he can repair it with, but he has a new Slugger Boy squad, and he's getting a 2nd Slugger Boy squad. So that's very interesting. He's getting 2 melee units and 2 Sluggers of all the melee units to think of. At a time when those melee units are going to be getting focused down very, very easily. Now, the Death Dreads, actually, I feel if the Death Dreads were in the retreat path of this Autarch, they might even take it out. But PhatE also probably concerned about keeping those Death Dreads alive, especially with these Death Dreads being a big part of what's keeping PhatE in this game right now, and also considering the fact that they don't bleed. Certainly, PhatE is also bleeding from everything else, but oh no, I heard a Warp Spider teleport. I was going to say, if those Warp Spiders teleported right where the Death Dreads are, this one Death Dread with 94 hit points is getting very, very close to dying. I think one Haywire will kill it. If not one Haywire, then two definitely will. And in fact, I'm almost positive that one Haywire will kill it, since one Haywire probably does over 100 damage. Probably does something like 130, 140, 150. We're going to have double Haywires on this one, and then we're going to follow up with the Bright Lance, but we did have it... Oh no, why is... Oh, because it did double Haywired, it can't move at all. Double Haywired, so... I think this Death Dread might be dead. If it can... It needs to try to get... Oh no, it's going forward. I almost feel like it might have been able to get out of the firing arc of the Guardian weapon team, but I don't know that for sure. I think it was worth a try, though. And what likely happened is that PhatE probably just didn't pick up his micro after the Death Dread was unhaywired. And then the Death Dreads just started attacking units that were near it, and then it actually made it go closer to the Guardian weapon team. Now, one of the things that's tough, oh, wow! Oh, wait. So, yeah, Guardian weapon team went down, which I knew was going to happen. I thought the Autarch went down as well, but that's not the case. One of the things I was going to say is that, of course, I noticed that PhatE has a huge amount of red. Unfortunately, he's not in Tier 3, so he can't do a rocks. And then, as far as the Warboss globals, as good as they are, this is actually just given what Fear has. The Warboss globals are not going to be that good, and we see that PhatE has actually been using a lot of Ardboys. In some cases, that's allowing them to actually fight against the Warp Spiders, but even that is not really being that effective. And we see right now the Warboss getting this is all the knockback occurring continuously, and he's having trouble even retreating out of that. And basically, just the Warp Spider continues to knock back as long as he's channeling energy to the heavy gauge filament ability. And pretty much what's even giving PhatE a chance is the fact that the Warp Spider Exarch occasionally stops shooting. All right, I feel like right now I think PhatE needs to move. Yeah, keep moving his shooter boys up. Just with how much health, I feel like with the amount of health that Fear's Warp Spiders had, he might have been able to fight them, though they did get a little bit of a heal from the Autarch jumping in with them. Just when the Autarch jumps down and she lands, she actually heals friendly units.
The enemy's taken one of our requisition points.
Now, in spite of everything, I feel like in many ways PhatE has been on the losing end of a lot of engagements. He's certainly been bleeding a huge amount. I feel that he is nevertheless... Well, not I feel. He has the VP lead somehow.
He's got 200 points left.
Alright, so now we got a Weird Boy purchase out for PhatE. Now, I'm definitely not proficient in the Orcs versus Eldar matchup, but my theory crafting says that the Weird Boy would actually be very, very good for dealing with Warp Spiders. Whether it's Warp Vomit or even just with his basic attack. Warp Spiders can be, even a single Warp Spider squad can be very, very difficult to deal with. Because Warp Spiders, generally, because they're a very high-range DPS unit, I believe they actually, certainly in retail statistics, I think they may have actually had the highest range DPS of any squad. I don't remember the exact statistics. I'm not as good with numbers as I used to be. But even if it's not... Either way, they're still up there in terms of their range DPS. They are one of the highest range DPS squads in the game. So it's often just very, very hard to fight them. And they don't really get countered by melee. In fact, they actually counter melee. so it can be tough to counter them, and there are a few units that counter them. Tzeentch Chaos Space Marines will counter a single War Spider squad if they're fully upgraded, although they do that much more expensively. And they do that because they have comparable range DPS while being tougher. Most squads are either not as tough as Warp Spiders, or they don't do as much range damage. Now, in this case, we have a single entity who's going to be doing area of effect damage, and he just does that continuously. Oh, that's going to be the end of this, Death Dread. The Weird Boy still needs to be very careful about taking too much damage and getting wiped entirely. We have another sync kill. This one returning kind of a vengeance kill from before. But the Weird Boy, just even, like, he can use either Warp Vomit or his basic attack. Even if the Warp Spiders teleport away, he'll be able to attack before the Warp Spiders cooldown. Basically, before the Warp Spiders can teleport again. So they won't be able to dodge the Weird Boy's attacks endlessly. And even a single attack from the Weird Boy is actually really going to hurt the Warp Spiders. So generally, Warp Spiders, they definitely get countered by ranged Terminators. Probably countered by Castricans, maybe Flash Hits. And I feel like now would be a time for Warboss Globals. Ardboys may be on cooldown. And I think the Warboss actually going to be pretty lucky to even get out of there alive. But he's been getting hit so hard by the Warp Spider Exarch's heavy gauge Death Spinner. That ability is just so powerful. Probably one of the most powerful single entity counters in the game, if not the most powerful single entity counter. And especially considering the rest of the range DPS that Fear has available to him. The Warp Spider Exarch is going to be pinning the Warboss in place, while the rest of his units do a lot of damage. That's also one risk to the Weird Boy. Right now, the Weird Boy is actually really at a huge amount of risk. So PhatE is now really on the ropes. In fact, Fear is actually in a position where he could almost go to Tier 3. He's actually about to win the game without it. PhatE lost the Warboss. And Fear is actually now amassing a pretty big army, while PhatE's is actually really dwindling. That being said, though, oh no, the Weird Boy did get hit by that ability, getting very close to dying. I was gonna say, is the Wraith Lord gonna go for it? I don't think he needs to, because I think he's gonna win the game. I think the effect is he's actually just gonna win the game. Oh, I think the Weird Boy just tried to go for a shot on the Wraith Lord, didn't quite get it, and that ends up being the game. And, I mean, the build, I feel like the build from Fear was pretty dominating. Level 4 Warp Spiders, level 4 Warp Spiders, level 4 Dire Avengers, level 4 Dire Avengers, level 7 Warp Spider Exarch. My god. And the Warboss really had trouble being relevant in that game. And I would not be entirely surprised if this is a matchup that favors the Warp Spider Exarch, as much as the Warboss is a very proven hero. In any case, hope you enjoyed the cast. Have a good night.